Hey, this is Jerry from Blitz Studio, and in this special Valentine's edition, what I want to do is put together just a little game that's really quick. It's going to be a little bouquet of hearts at the very bottom of the screen. Little gem hearts are going to fall down, and then we're going to update the score based off of that, which is a slider, and we're going to update that slider value. And then once that slider gets 100%, then we're going to spawn a level complete. And if you're ready to get started, let's go. Okay, so here I'm back in Unity, and we have our little special Valentine edition. So I've just thrown together this little model that's a bouquet of flowers, which are hearts. So the idea is that I'm gonna have hearts that are gonna fall down from the top, and you need to catch them. And then what I'm gonna do is also have a UI element, which is gonna be a slider. And then based off of once that slider reaches 100%, then we will spawn a game over. So here we go. So currently I have the player set up. I have the model in there with the little hearts. I also, inside the player, also have a little particle system that is set up to just show when a heart is collected, then we'll play this little burst of particles. So I have that set up as well inside of this, and I have it turned off. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to go ahead and just start out with creating an empty game object. I'm going to have this be my manager. And then inside of that, I'm going to go ahead and create a new empty. And this is where I'm going to create all of my FSMs. So the first thing I need to do is create an FSM for a manager for movement. Okay, so I'm going to have this be movement. And go ahead and create a new FSM. And what we're going to do is to get access. So let's see, get access. Here we go. So we're getting access, and what access do we want? Well, if we go to our edit in project settings, and then within our project settings, you can see that there is an input manager and the axes. And what we're going to do is get the axes for horizontal. So it's this name that we're looking for. And by default, Unity already has negative and positive numbers for the left and right key, and also the A and D key. So for both left-handed and right-handed folks. That's important just to know, because I'm left-handed and a lot of games only have the WASD keys, and that like upsets me because I can't use my arrow keys because I'm left-handed. Anyway, all right, so what I want to do is I want to go ahead and capture the horizontal input. All right, so I'm going to capture the horizontal input, and I have a multiplier of 1. I'm probably going to go ahead and modify that in a little bit, but I'm going to store this value in a new variable, and I'm going to call this movement x. All right, and call it xmove. Let's do that, xmove. Cool. So I'm going to do that, and then what I want to do is I want to update the position of the bouquet based off of the position of the xmove. Set velocity. Let's just move that underneath our get axis. And it's saying, hey, the game object that you have requires a rigid body. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to specify a game object, and I want that game object to be my player. And then it's saying, hey, you need a rigid body. So we'll go ahead and add a rigid body. And if we add a rigid body, it's also going to add gravity. Okay, so we've got a rigid body added. We also need to uncheck gravity. And then I also need to add a box collider to this. So to my player, again, we're in our player here, I'm going to add a box collider. So a box collider. Let's make sure that's exactly where we need it to be. And depending on how easy or how hard you want to make this for the user, you can make this box a little bigger or a little smaller. But I'm just going to make it fairly wide. And that's probably works pretty good, I think. Okay, so we'll call that done. And so we've got that set up. Now I can go back to my movement. And so currently we are updating the player's X position based off of the input that we're getting from our key down. So let's give this a try real quick, and we want to also make sure that we're doing every frame. And then again, here we are updating the X move. Okay, so that's the velocity that we're gathering, and we're going to set the velocity of our X based off of X move. Okay, so here we're gathering the input, and then here is where we're going to use it. So let's go ahead and give this a try real quick. I'm going to use my arrow keys left and right. Yeah, and that works pretty good, although it's a little on the slow side. So this is where we're going to use that multiplier. So let's update that to 3 maybe. Yeah, and that's not too bad. Okay, so that works. Now the next thing we need to do is to go ahead and create some flowers that are going to be falling down the page. And then what we want to do is with those flowers, we want to make sure that we're gathering input to check to see if they have entered the box collider of the bouquet. So what I have done is these little hearts are just an asset that I downloaded for free on the asset store. This Simple Gems Ultimate Animated Customizable Pack by Aaron Sky. And so I've got those gems there. Those are in my project here. And I've got models right here. And here is the heart. I'm going to bring one of those in. You can see that it doesn't have the material attached to it. So I need to go ahead and attach the material. And I've got the pink material. Just drag that right onto the model. And there we go. Okay, so we've got that set up. And I'm going to go ahead and just put this into a new empty game object. And we'll call this heart gem. And I'll drag that heart in there. So that way I can make sure I'm controlling, and if I want to add effects or anything else, I can have it kind of in that nice little package. Okay, so with my heart gem, I also want to go ahead and add a box collider. And so this gem has a box collider to it. Now the question is, do I want to have this fall using physics down the page, or do I want to have this just set a velocity of it in a negative Y direction? So there's a couple different ways you can accomplish that. And I think I'll just go ahead and use physics. So let's go ahead and just use a rigid body. So let's do this. We're going to go ahead and also add a rigid body to this. And yes, we want to use gravity, and I do want to make this just a little bit smaller. So let's go ahead and go 0.3 maybe. Yeah, and that's not too bad. So let's go ahead and just move this up the screen and move it over. Back off just a little bit, and let's just see if this falls real quick. Yep, perfect. Okay. The other thing that we want to make sure is that it's on the same Z-plane, Z-axis of the player, which is on 0, and our Z is not 0, so we want to make sure that's at 0. So the player and the heart are at the same position. So now there's some things that we need to be working on. One is that I need to make sure that my heart gem, that the box collider is set up to be a trigger. So we want to have that be true. All right. Then I also want to tag this as heart or as gem. So let's just call this gem. We'll go ahead and hit that, go back to our heart gem, and then we need to also add the tag. Okay, so now it's tagged as heart or as gem. Okay. The next thing we need to do is go back, and now we need to create a FSM specifically for detecting if the player has hit one of these gems. So let's go ahead and add a new empty game object. So in our managers, and I'll call this score. And go ahead and add an FSM. And we'll call this gem detection. We want to see if one of those gems actually hits our bouquet. Okay, so the gem has a tag of gem. The heart also has a trigger. Let's go ahead and do a trigger event. So trigger event. And we need to specify the game object. And what we're going to do is specify the player. On trigger enter with a collision tag of gem. So when the player has hit a gem game object, we want to send an event. So what we're going to do is to create a new event, gem detected, and create an event. And then we need to add that to our Playmaker FSM. And now we can drag off to a new state. Then we need to determine what do we want to happen with this state. So let's go ahead and update score. And then also with that, I want to trigger my, in my player, my particle system. So what I'm going to do is to first turn my particle system on. So let's go ahead and activate game object. And what game object do we want to activate? Well, we want to activate our particle system that's within our player. So we want to activate that. So we're going to turn that on first. The next thing I need to do is I need to set up some kind of scoring system. And so what I want to do is I want to go ahead and have a score system. So let's go and within our variables, let's go ahead and add an int type of variable. So these are whole numbers. Let's call this score total. Okay, so we've got that. So currently it is at 0. And I think what I need to do is to have this be a specific number. So let's just specify what that number is. Let's just go ahead and say 20. So we need to gather 20 gems to have it be level complete. I need to create a new variable that's going to say how many gems have we collected. So let's go and create another variable that's also an int. And we'll have this be current score. Okay, so we're going to leave that as 0 because we're going to add to it every time a gem has been collected. So first we want to, okay, we have our particle system turned on. We also need to do an int add. So we're going to add to those variables. So int add. And we're going to add to our current score. Okay, and how many do we want to add? We're just going to add 1. And we don't want this to be every frame because it's just going to continually update. We only want to update it once we've hit one of those gems. Okay, cool. So we've got that set up. And then once it's done with that, what do we want to do? Well, we want to go ahead and create a new transition of finished. And then I'm going to go off to a new state. And then in that state, I'm going to just do a short wait. And that short wait's just enough time to allow my particle system to play. And my particle system only lasts for a max lifetime of 0.5. So I want to go ahead and just have that be 0.5, and then I'm going to turn that particle system off. So let's go back to our score. We'll do a wait. So we're going to do a wait, and that's going to be a time of 0.5. And then once we're done, we're going to go ahead and send a finished event. And then we're going to take that finished event and then go to a new state. And here we're going to turn that particle system off. So here we've got that particle system that we're turning on. Let's go ahead and deactivate it. So we're going to go ahead and turn particles off. Okay. And so here what we want to do is deactivate that particle system. And then once it's finished with doing that, we want to go ahead and have a finished event and then go back to gem detection. Okay. All right. So boom, there we go. So you can see that our current score is now 1. We've triggered our particle effect. It went and did a short wait, went and turned off the particle system, and now we're back to gem detection. Okay, so we know that all works. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my heart, and I'm now going to go ahead and put that into it as a prefab. So we're going to create a new folder for prefabs. And then I'm going to take that prefab, and I'm going to take that heart gem and add it as a prefab. And now I can go ahead and delete the one that's on screen. Now, next thing I want to do is I want to generate those gems up here in the top part of our scene, okay? And so what I want to do is I want to create a spawner. So I'm going to create a new game object, and I'll call this gem spawner. And then what I want to do is go ahead and again set up a manager for my spawner placement. Okay, and then it's also going to control the spawning of the game objects themselves, the gems. Okay, so let's go ahead and first make sure we are set to 0, 0, 0. I want to also go ahead and just add a 3D game object in here of a cube just so I can see where it's at in the game. And I'll make that cube a lot smaller. Let's go 0.2, 0.2, 0.2, and I will just turn this off later on. And so I can see exactly where that's at. And let's go ahead and set up a manager for this. So we're going to create a new empty in our managers. And we'll call this spawner. And then with that is where we're going to change the placement of where those gems are created. Okay. So what we're going to do is with our spawner, let's go ahead and create a new FSM. And the thing that I want to do is to change where the placement of that spawner is. Okay. So here the cube is what we're going to be positioning. So what I want to do is to set up where this position is. So again, this is our spawner, and here is the FSM that we're creating to move that around. So let's go set random floats. Okay. So here what we want to do is we want to set random floats. So I want to kind of determine within kind of this little box grid of where this cube is to say, hey, these are where the gems are going to be spawned. Okay. Just so I can see that. So what I want to do is I'm going to take my gem spawner up here. And let's go, first we need to move it up the screen. So let's say a position of 6 is at the top, and then an X position of negative 2.5 and a positive of 2.5 as well. And then how far down do we want to go? So let's just say to 5. So positive 5 to positive 6 and negative 2.5 to 2.5 on the X. Okay. So here we go. We want to take and set some random floats. Okay. So first we need to create a float variable. So we're going to say this is being the X position, and we'll have that be a random float. To create another float variable that's going to be the Y position, and we'll have that be a float as well. And then here we want to set what those floats are. So we want to go random, let's see, random float. There we go. So random float, and the minimum for random float is going to be for the X. We're going to have this be negative 2.5 to a positive 2.5. Okay, so that's from the right edge and left to the left edge of the screen there. And we're going to store this as X position. Okay. The next thing we want to do is to also do that for the Y position as well. So I'm just going to copy and, oops. So here we're just going to copy and paste. And then here we want this to be a minimum of 5 and a max of 6. And then we're going to store this as the Y position. Okay. So what's going to happen is it's going to place this around within that kind of box area. So what we've kind of essentially done is to create the upper left-hand corner to the lower right-hand corner, which has created a box of where this position of the spawner can be. Okay, so here we've done that. And now what we need to do is to go from here, because we're done kind of setting that float, go to a finished state. And then now we want to actually set the position of our gem spawner. So here we go. We want to set position of spawner. Cool. And now let's go and do set position. Okay, so what game object is it that we want to set the position of? Well, we want to specify that, and we want that to be the gem spawner. Okay, and then here we're going to set the X position of using X position, and we're going to set the Y position using Y position. And we don't want to do this every frame, we just want to do it once. okay? And then again, this is a finished state. We want to go ahead and go from here to another state that's going to actually spawn a gem. So let's go and spawn gem. And then here, what we want to do is to create a game object. Okay, so what we're going to do is to create object. And what game object is it we want to create? Well, we need to actually use a prefab to create this. So that's why we use this as a prefab. So here we're going to drag that prefab right down into that game object that we want to create. And we're going to have the spawn point be our gem spawner. So we're going to drag that down in there. Again, we're randomly kind of placing the spawn point around, and then wherever that spawn point is, we're going to generate a gem. And then once we're done doing that, we need to kind of wait for maybe a random period of time. So I want to go add transition of finished. We're going to go to a short wait and random wait. Again, these are just names for the states. And let's go and set up a random wait. So random wait. Here we go, random wait. And how long is it that we want to wait until the next gem's created? So let's maybe go 0.3 to 1. Yeah, that works. And then once we're done waiting for that specified period of time, whatever that random is, we need to go ahead and go back to our set random floats again, which is going to then change our spawner position. So let's give this a try. So I'm going to go ahead and leave this box up here because it's going to show us where our spawner position is. And then we should hopefully see gems spawning kind of all over the place within that little box grid. So that's spawning correctly, but the spawn is not in line with my player. So I think the easiest thing is just to move my player back a little bit, just so we can make sure we're on the same plane. So let's give that a try real quick. There we go. That's working. And I think my movement is just a little bit slow. So let's go ahead and up the multiplier of that. Let's up that to 5 maybe. Give that a try real quick. Yeah, that's working pretty good. Cool. So we've got that. Now I can go ahead and turn this cube off or just delete it. And then now I need to kind of like start adding some score. So let's go, and I first want to add a UI. So let's go ahead and create UI, and I'll create a UI slider. And so we've got that little slider right there. Let's go ahead and increase the size of that to be maybe 400 pixels wide by 30 pixels tall. Let's maybe go a little bit bigger than that. Let's go 90 pixels tall. That might be a little too big. And that's not too bad. And then I want to go ahead and turn off the handle because we don't really need that. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete that. And then so it's really just a matter of the space that we need to fill and then how big the slider bar is. Okay, so here we have our slider. We've got it in position. Now we need to go ahead and update the score. Now, if we look at the slider, we've got the value right here, which is the amount that the slider is from 0 to 100%, which is a normalized value. So normalized is from 0 to 1. So what we want to do is to figure out every time a gem is collected, we want to make it a percentage of that bar. So we could just say, hey, it's 10% every time a gem is collected, or 5% every time a gem is collected. So we just need to keep that in mind for how much those gems are worth. So what I want to do is I want to go ahead and create a new variable, and I'm going to have that be a float type variable. And we'll have this be a float variable called slider value, okay? So we've got that. We're gonna have that be 0 right from the very beginning, which is fine. And what we need to do is we need to update that, okay? So we're gonna update our, we need to update every time the score has been updated. We want to add to that value. Okay, so we're gonna add value of, let's do not an int add, we want to do a float add. Float add, if I can just spell that, float add, there we go. So we're gonna do a float add, and what float value is that we wanna update. We wanna create or use the slider value, that's the value that we just created, which is a float. And we don't want to add like 5, 10, 15 because the slider only goes from 0 to 1. So what we want to do is if we want to have 5% of that value, we're just going to have 0.05. And if we want to have 10 gems, 0.1. So let's just maybe just do 0.1. So that way we need to collect 10 gems to get to 1. Okay. And we don't need to choose every frame per second. We're just updating that once. Okay. So we're updating that variable. Now we're going to use that variable to update our UI. Okay. So here we're going to go to, if we go to UI in our options here, so UI, and then you'll see that there's one called UI slider set value. So we're going to use that one right there. So UI slider set, oops, not what I'm looking for, set value. I'll move this to the bottom of my list here. And it's saying, hey, what game object do you want to use? I want to use this slider right here. Drag that in. And then instead of having this be a hard-coded number, what we're going to do is update it based off of that slider variable that we created, okay? So here we're updating this variable called slider value every time the gem hits by 0.1. And then we're setting the UI to be increased by 0.1 or whatever that value is, variable, okay? Then we're gonna go do our wait, turn off particle system, go back and detect another gem. So hopefully this should update the UI up here every time we collect a gem. There we go. So now we're updating the slider value. And now the next thing we want to do is if it gets to 100%, if it gets to 1, then we want to also trigger a level complete. Okay, so here we're updating our slider. So what we want to do is if our variable of slider value gets to 100, we want to then trigger a level complete. And so let's go ahead and add one more little state in here to detect if we have, if we've got that value to be 100. So what I'm going to do is to go over, let's, instead of finished going to wait, we're going to go ahead and go finished to a new state. And then we'll call this check slider value. Okay. Let's scooch this over just a little bit. And here what we want to do is just check that value of that variable to see if it's 1. Okay, so what we're going to do is to, let's see, float. We want to do a float compare. So float compare. So I want to check the value of that slider. So we've got that value, slider value. We want to check to see if it's 1. If it's 1 or more, then we want to trigger level complete. So what we want to do here is if it equals or greater than, let's go ahead and create 2 new events here. Continue checking. And then we're going to also have one that's called level complete. Cool. So here we want to go back. So if it's equal to 1, then we want to go ahead and continue level complete. And we need that transition in there. And we're also going to put that as greater than as well. So level complete. But if it's not, we want to continue checking. Okay. So add that transition. So here our slider value, if it's level complete, we want to go to a new state that's going to say level complete. If it's not, then we're going to continue checking. So we'll go back into our wait with the level checking. And if it's level complete, let's go ahead and add a new state here. We'll call this level complete. And here in the level complete, what we're going to do is let's see, first we need to drag over here. Okay, so in level complete, we need to decide what we want to do. One, we need to go ahead and have a UI that pops up. So let's go and create a new canvas. And we'll call this our UI slider. And then this one we'll call our UI level complete. And I'm gonna add a new panel to that. And we'll change the color to pink. Something like that. And let's go ahead and add some text on that too. Text Mesh Pro. We need to go ahead and add our Text Mesh Pro Essentials. And then we've got our text there. Let's go ahead and just add text as level complete. We'll go ahead and center that text and make it just a little bit bigger. Let's go ahead and bold it. And we need to make the text area larger. I always like to just go to the edge of the UI to make sure it's centered. So level complete, then I can increase the size of that. There we go. Let's go ahead and just make that go up. There we go. So level complete. So we'll pop up that UI. So let's go ahead and turn that off and then go back to our score. So level complete, we want to turn on that UI. So we're going to go ahead and activate game object. So activate game object. And what game object is it that we want to activate? We want to go ahead and activate our level complete. And then with that, we also want to turn off our spawner. Okay, so we've got our spawner right here. So I'm going to deactivate that game object. So let's go ahead, copy and paste, and we're going to deactivate our spawner. There we go. So hopefully, and then we turn that off. There, cool. So let's give this a try real quick to see what happens. So hopefully once this gets to 100%, then we'll spawn our level complete. We won't be spawning gems anymore. Boom, there we go. Hey, I hope you guys enjoyed this special Valentine's edition of a demo. Again, it's just a quick little game, a little bouquet that's collecting heart gems at the bottom of the screen. We're moving that back and forth, and then once the slider value gets to 100%, then we're doing a level complete. Again, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and that little bell icon down there so you know when the next tutorial is available. Until next time, love.